Right now, there is an invisible $1,700 invoice sitting on your kitchen table. And it's not just normal inflation. We are actually watching a massive, behind-the-scenes financial war between the White House and the Supreme Court over who actually controls the price of the things you buy every single day. And here's the crazy part. The highest court in the land recently stepped in and declared the president's entire trade plan completely illegal. But your prices? They're still going up anyway. So where exactly is this $1,700 coming from? It's basically a hidden retail tax you're paying right now. Even though a historic executive trade policy was explicitly blocked by the courts, what we've seen since is a relentless, high-stakes game of legal cat and mouse. The executive branch rolls out tariffs, the courts intervene, the administration reroutes the policy, and it just keeps going. And the sheer speed of how this is unfolding is literally staggering. Let's look at exactly how this happened. In early 2026, the administration tried using emergency powers to slap sweeping tariffs on global imports, completely bypassing Congress. Importers sued immediately. And on February 20th, the Supreme Court handed down a massive 6-3 decision striking the whole thing down, saying, look, the Constitution gives the power to collect duties solely to Congress. Instantly, 3/4 of a projected $1.4 trillion in government revenue just vaporized. A huge victory for businesses, right? Well, that victory lasted maybe a few hours. Before the ink was even dry on that ruling, the executive branch pivoted to a completely different, decades-old loophole from 1974, Section 122, to instantly slap a brand new 10% global surcharge right back onto those exact same imports. The trade courts struck that down too in May, but then an appeals court stepped in days later and paused the injunction. So right now, the tax is still actively being collected while this entire legal circus just spins in the background. And the brutal reality of this legal whiplash is who actually ends up footing the bill. Because lower and middle-income families spend a much larger chunk of their paychecks on basics, things like clothes, packaged food, household supplies, this whole thing acts as a highly regressive consumption tax. Economic models are showing this cuts the after-tax income of the bottom half of working Americans by about 3.5%. Meanwhile, if you look at the top 1% of earners, they actually see a net income gain because there are separate tax cuts that completely wipe out whatever they lose to the tariffs.
And to be clear, this isn't just some abstract theory that economists are arguing about in a classroom. Independent analyses from across the ideological spectrum are all confirming the exact same staggering financial drag. You've got the Joint Economic Committee looking at Treasury Customs collections and Congressional Budget Office data, and they hit $1,745. The Yale Budget Lab tracked price index adjustments and landed at $1,700. The Peterson Institute looked at income impact models. Exactly $1,700. So we are looking at a real, measurable, undeniable drain on household purchasing power confirmed by completely different groups using completely different methods.
Now, there's a really common misconception out there that foreign countries are the ones paying these tariffs. But the actual mechanics of how this money is extracted tells a totally different story. Empirical models from the Federal Reserve confirm that foreign exporters are absolutely not picking up this bill. The data shows that up to 94% of the initial tariff cost falls directly on domestic American importers. The companies actually buying the goods at the border. The foreign exporters, they only absorb about 6%. That means American supply chains are suddenly carrying these massive new costs, and there's just no way they can eat those losses permanently. So how exactly are stores handling this madness without just going bankrupt? Well, a group of Harvard economists decided to find out. They tracked real-time barcode data across 350,000 different retail products to see exactly how these costs get passed down to you at the cash register. And what they uncovered is basically a massive psychological experiment being played on everyday shoppers. Here's what they found. If a retailer takes an imported item and slaps a bright tariffed banner right on the price tag, the cost gets passed on to you instantly. It's a huge, fast price hike. But if the store doesn't put up a banner, if they don't explicitly point the finger at the government, there is virtually zero price response. Retailers are absolutely terrified of customer anger. They are so scared of damaging their brand that they will literally sit there and bleed cash, absorbing the cost of the tax themselves unless they can visually prove to the customer that the government is forcing them to raise the price.
But, a business can only bleed cash for so long before something breaks. Overall, this combination of higher border costs and these weird retail psychology games has spiked the price of imported goods by an average of 6.8 percentage points above where they were trending before the tariffs hit.
And here is where the contagion really starts to spread across the entire market. Even products manufactured right here in America have jumped by 4.8 percentage points. Why? Because local domestic manufacturers looked around and realized, hey, our imported competition is artificially expensive right now. We can quietly raise our own prices to match them. So the entire pricing floor of the American economy just shifts upward.
You can walk into basically any local grocery or hardware store right now and feel this instantly. Everyday morning staples like your coffee and tea, surging by a full 10%. Seafood is up 7.9%. And if you're trying to renovate your house right now, you're getting absolutely slammed. Retail furniture prices are up 7.4%, and basic home building materials are up over 10.5%. That's directly because of permanent duties on imported lumber, cabinets, and fabricated steel.
But the human cost here goes way beyond just the checkout aisle. We're seeing incredibly vulnerable patients getting hit with a 100% permanent duty on patented pharmaceutical active ingredients, which is substantially elevating domestic healthcare costs. And on the manufacturing side, these massive input costs are threatening American workers. Projections are showing over 104,000 full-time jobs lost in the steel and aluminum sectors, plus another 23,000 jobs lost in heavy trucks and auto parts, simply because domestic assembly costs have just become too expensive to sustain.
As you'd expect, this massive squeeze has ignited a fierce institutional battle in Washington. On one side, you have federal judges and nonpartisan economic experts arguing that using national emergency laws to manipulate trade deficits is massive executive overreach. They say it creates a regressive consumption tax that is paralyzing the domestic economy. But then on the flip side, the administration argues that these sweeping unilateral peacetime powers are absolutely necessary. Their defense is that this is the only legitimate way to protect domestic industries from an unfair global market, structural excess capacity, and global labor abuses. And the administration knows perfectly well that their temporary 1970s workarounds are legally fragile. They know the appeals courts could strike them down any day. So they are quietly building a much more durable protectionist wall. The U.S. Trade Representative has now fast-tracked new investigations under Section 301 of the Trade Act. Now, this is a highly insulated statutory tool that has survived extensive litigation in the past, and it is explicitly designed to permanently bypass Congress.
And these aggressive new probes, they aren't just targeting a handful of problematic items. They are absolutely massive in scale. We're talking about covering a staggering 99% of everything imported into the United States from across 60 different global economies. Top officials have been completely transparent about this. These probes are designed to explicitly recreate the exact same tariff walls that the Supreme Court just tore down.
This looming threat of a permanent, legally unstrikable trade wall has essentially frozen the corporate world in its tracks. Businesses are out here deploying hyper-specific cost models down to the individual barcode just to figure out what they can even afford to sell anymore. Half of all surveyed retailers are reporting gross margin declines directly tied to the tariffs. But maybe even more importantly, 54% are actively delaying their long-term investments in logistics and warehousing, and 37% are postponing major new capital investments entirely. The real economy is essentially hitting pause, just waiting to see who actually wins this legal war. And this instability isn't stopping at the border. It's aggressively fracturing global alliances. The joint review of the North American Trade Agreement is completely frozen right now while the U.S. demands stringent new concessions. Meanwhile, close allies like the European Union are being forced to accept structural 15% European-wide tariffs just to secure temporary exemptions on critical industrial categories. The entire map of global trade is quite literally being forcibly rewritten.
Ultimately, what we are witnessing is a profound constitutional imbalance. As the administration cycles through completely different legal justifications faster than the courts can even issue injunctions, both businesses and everyday consumers remain trapped in this relentless, incredibly expensive loop. The courts might strike down a specific policy, sure, but the systemic friction, that remains. As the saying goes, when the White House and the courts fight over global trade, the court battle is free, but the consumer pays the admission price.
We are looking at a future where targeted enforcement laws are being transformed into permanent executive weapons. So if an administration can simply reconstruct rejected trade taxes over and over again, completely outrunning judicial checks through an endless loop of statutory loopholes, what actually happens to the average household budget when a global trade war truly has no legal limits? And who truly controls the price of your groceries?
An investment in knowledge pays the best interest, so why not invest in this channel? Click like and subscribe for more.